Hi, I'm Vic Vogel. I wrote the book Renaissance Leadership Odyssey and several other books, and I'll leave you a link to those books. Also have a uh, also have a channel on YouTube called Building Renaissance Leaders. In case you want to go look at some of the podcasts I've been doing, some of the information I've been doing there. I use that channel primarily as a uh, digital library reference for the kinds of information that I put out to help people become more effective Renaissance leaders of the future. Renaissance Leadership Odyssey is primarily a leadership paradigm change process. Within that, of course, are organizational changes that need to be dealt with, but that's all explained in the book. Today, what I want to talk to you about is a tip. The tip is an evidence based tip. It's research done by Gallup. I've used them in the past, I've followed them. They've been following leadership for decades over the years, and they have a lot of good information, but they do a lot of good research. It's easy to look at and easy to understand. In this case, I thought it was great because I wanted to show you this information and offer you a couple of tips. Gallup found in a recent study that among nearly 15,000 employees, only 16% said the last conversation with their manager was extremely meaningful. Now, extremely meaningful is on the high end of the scale. However, that's kind of what you want as a leader. You want your people excited and believing that everything you have to say to them is meaningful. But in this case, we're finding out only 6% of the people feel that's really the case. So, you know, I began to ask why. I kind of know why, okay, but I found out, for example, that a lot of it is when you look at some of the responses that Gallup is going to offer you to improve this is based on a lack of understanding about what happens during interpersonal communication. And so, how do you optimize interpersonal communication to inspire employees and to engage meaningful conversations? This isn't something that um, Gallup is offering. So, you're getting a Gallup recommendation here, which I think is good. So, Gallup said the most common characteristics of extremely meaningful conversations uh, in order of importance were one, recognition or appreciation for recent work. It's, pat on the back. You did a good job. I appreciate all your work you're doing. That was the most meaningful conversation employees felt between their leaderships. The next one was collaboration and relationship. And this is kind of what got me on the kick of why interpersonal communication is important because collaboration in teams, of course, means the development of synergy and things like that. But on to one-on-one conversations, collaboration is a interaction that creates a learning kind of experience and a growth experience for employees that allows them to gain further trust and further interest in discussing things with the leader, which builds that relationship. That is definitely an interpersonal communication issue. And we'll see here why I feel like that only 16% of people really have collaboration and relationship conversations. There's something deeper than just trying to create a collaboration discussion, primarily because you don't know how to do it. And I'll show you why here in a second. Current goals and priorities at work. This is not just providing current goals, but are they clear? Are they understandable? Are they timely? A lot of things like that. These are all important aspects of interpersonal communication, also. The length of the conversation. Now, Gallup said the acceptable conversation seemed to be between 15 and 30 minutes, but that's if you had frequent conversations. If you don't have frequent conversations with the employees, those discussions that were meaningful had to expand out to longer than 30 minutes to make up for the missing information employees weren't receiving. And employee strengths or things they do well. Now, this also could tie to the recognition thing at the top, but you could see employees need to understand and know what they're doing well. They wouldn't necessarily consider a meaningful conversation if you were telling them they were doing something wrong, which meant you probably need to understand how to provide performance feedback in a way that's perceived as helping them understand how to create those strengths and how those strengths will help them in the future and things like that. So, again, this comes back every single one of these 5 areas they're recommending for improvement in meaningful conversations tied very closely to interpersonal communication, but they tie to something else too that's important. Uh, so, how do you improve meaningful conversation? Well, actually, you can do those 5 things, but how you do those 5 things makes a significant difference between being effective and actually getting that 16% up to 70, 80, 90%. Um, and I found this to be true in the area I worked in too. First, you really need to master interpersonal communication principles. And I spent a lot of years doing this. And if you want to know what those were, I've spent a lot of time helping people to learn how to communicate because they were never taught to communicate in high school and they were never taught most of the time when they graduated from college. They didn't receive comprehensive courses in how to interpersonally connect effectively. And so I spent a lot of years. I have 40 years in a lot of industries, different sizes of organizations, domestic and international, variety of industries. Uh, and so mastering communication is something that I spent actually decided I need to take time to work with leaders on before we really got into in-depth leadership skills development that we felt would help them improve because we could teach them those leadership skills, but if the delivery wasn't effective, those skills are basically useless. And there's actually a lot of information out there. There's a chart out there I have that I've put on LinkedIn somewhere that showed that only 20% of what leaders learn in leadership development actually gets changes the performance of employees that are underneath those leaders. Only 20%. Okay, and actually 25% is are the of the ones that take leadership development, 25% they actually learn said they actually learned something. That means 75% didn't. It means 80% of what they did learn didn't get transferred to most of the employees out of all those people that took the courses. But that's a different one. Here we're trying to say there are some specifics about interpersonal communication you need to learn as a leader, and you need to master those well in order to apply other dynamics like uh, emotional intelligence. Okay. Emotional intelligence is the other area that I recommend that you learn a lot about. And I have Daniel Goleman's emotional intelligence program here. That link will be down in the description. Uh, uh, these two areas right here are two of the three pillars that I say if you want to become a Renaissance leader of the future and be able to cope with all the things that are going on in the future, that these are two of the three pillars that I recommend that leaders must master. They must be able to handle these highly effectively. And the other one, of course, it is psychologically based. It's about positive intelligence and how to improve yourself as a leader. So there's a dynamic associated in there that connects all three of those areas, makes one no more important than the other. You must master all three of them if you're going to be a leader who's going to be able to cope with everything that's going to be thrown at you in the next few decades. Okay, so but in this case here, the connection to employees, it's really critical here that you master interpersonal communication skill sets and understand how to apply emotional intelligence. And like I said, the interpersonal communication skills that I taught day in and day out, hour after hour, week after week, month after month, sometimes year after year, I spent coaching these people on these areas. Now, I took these 12 areas and consolidated them from my notes. And these were the things that I was developing leaders in before we started a full leadership development program. So they were pretty effective communicators at that point and could very well implement those other leadership development aspects, many of which were listed here in Gallup's 5 areas for meaningful communication. Uh, but sometimes people don't know how to get those 5 areas apart, kind of like I mentioned in collaboration earlier. So these are two of those areas that are extremely important and meaningful to conversations in that area. And so after you learn those, you really want to create and build these interpersonal communication and empathy tools you have into your strategy for interacting with your people, and put that into measurable terms. You want to see a percentage of difference. You want to assess, learn these, apply what Gallup said using the tools that we're talking about here, and then reassess those and that'll make you much more effective. But what you're going to find is that's going to also help you in your ability to learn other and new and different leadership skills and sets when it comes to uh, communicating in a meaningful way with other people. You got to remember, uh, employees, for the most part, uh, also need to understand this information. In Renaissance Leadership Odyssey, I have a section particularly say you have to drive this education all the way down to the lowest employee in the organization, because the more they know, but when you get to the employee, you kind of revert, or you convert it a little bit and you say, okay, I want to teach you how to interact with leadership. I want you to understand what leaderships are trying to do so you can understand how to connect with that communication and be effective. And in many cases, what you have going is you have employees who are staying in a department for a long period of time, but you may have leaders come in every 3 years, maybe even 2 years now. And these employees have to adapt to a new leader. They recognize, they understand that that is the leader. They're going to have to adjust to that leader. But they have to learn, the more effectively they can learn to create that symbiotic relationship where it's evolving over time and they connect with each other and they can actually get into that collaborative mode in their discussions. If they know how to do that and know what they're expecting, the leader's trained on how to do that effectively, that connects, that brings that connection closer into a much more meaningful connection in the long run. So Gallup uh, took these 5 areas and they some leaders on how to do this, and probably some of the communication stuff that I'm talking about, they were applying in some way, shape, or form in the education. But then they went back and looked at them. So this is how Gallup knows that if you apply these and apply them effectively, uh, which were they upskill, they call it upskill, training them to be able to do this effectively, that there was some movement in engagement. Okay. The first thing they learned is those leaders who got this training, uh, 10 to 22% of them actually improved their own engagement, their own engagement. Now, of course, you can understand they're probably comparing this against a control group that didn't receive this information. Okay. The other thing they found was that 8 to 18% or higher engagement within their teams. So the teams, their department or whatever the team was, they were improving their engagement also when these concepts, these five concepts were applied effectively. And 20 to 28% improvement in employee performance, primarily probably because employees were also getting more engaged based on these this information that was going through there. So what happens is you the tip is simple. These five steps, put these into your activities. They will work. But more importantly, take a little time. Look up these. Look up these uh, communication principles I talked about. They're on my website, victorvogel.com. And under interpersonal communication, there's a list of courses that I provided. Okay. So you'll want to take a look at those and give you, it kind of gives you an idea of what I've thinned out of all the communication you can learn in the world. These were the things that seem to help leaders become more effective leaders. Uh, and in addition, look up the Daniel Goleman website, begin to understand that role that empathy plays. It's so important in collaboration and building relationships and making that symbiotic relationship work well enough to where employees then allow those leaders to lead them. And that's exactly what happens. That is the optimal leadership state. When you have the meaningful interaction and connection with your employees that allows them to trust you enough and then provide you the tool they grant you, they give you they kind of give you their certificate of leadership, and you got them, and you as a team at that point forward, there's no stopping you. The problem is when that leader gets you going and the whole team's working and everything is working well and going fantastic, they promote the leader, or the leader finds another job because he gets offered more money, but that employee is still there. And that's why I tell people in Renaissance leadership, there is a paradigm shift. We virtually spend no time teaching employees the kinds of things we're teaching leaders, but from their perspective. And you need to take this down throughout the whole organization. And that talks about how you need to create that organization and what it needs to look like. So all of that is important stuff to learn, and it's there in the future. And kind of like I said, it's in the Renaissance Leadership Odyssey book. If the workbook I use is up there. It's for sale on the Buy Me a Coffee up there. That's what that QR code is. It's for sale if you don't want to take the course. It's a fairly expensive course, but it's not really. It's a good value, but it's still expensive. So some people may not be able to afford it, but you might be able to afford that book. And everything in that workbook is what I follow all the way to all of those principles are in there. So it's also on the Buy Me a Coffee chart area. But go out and learn about interpersonal communication. Find out about emotional intelligence, the most you can dig, the most you can get into. And those two combinations are an extremely powerful tool for connecting and creating meaningful conversations when you address those issues. Well, actually, when you learn those things, when you learn that communication, you learn what empathy is really all about, and you understand how to apply it. Those are the things that get touched by those courses, as those five things that Gallup said were the things that normally get into the conversations on a regular, ongoing, frequent basis, which you'll find is important in interpersonal communication. I hope you found these helpful. I encourage you, like I said, to check into the information. Make sure you learn. Uh, these are, I probably couldn't offer you any more important tip than these tips that you just heard about. So I hope to see you soon. I hope to see you in the courses, or I hope to see you on LinkedIn. If you have questions, I have not. I don't set up a fee structure for chats and things. I'm not creating a coaching or a consulting business here. I'm retired. There is a way through Buy Me a Coffee. If you like what I tell you, if you think it's valuable, and you just feel guilty about taking the advice, you can go up and check, buy me a coffee. Okay, that's what that's for. Um, but but generally speaking, if you have questions, if you want to discuss this, if you want to just get some insight, sometimes just a chat, a couple-hour chat, will make the difference and kind of course correct you in the right area and the right way. That makes a big difference. And those things I don't charge for. I don't charge for those things. So I, the only thing I basically do is sell my books, and when people want me to consult with them, I will. But I don't do that very often because, like I said, I'm retired. I'm not trying to build a business. So if you're excited about this, I'm going to try to put some of these kinds of tips out periodically as I find and discover them. And it's exciting to me that people are delving into these areas. You have a good evening, and I'll see you soon.